Welcome to Mormon Land, where we explore news in and about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I'm senior religion reporter Peggy Fletcher-Stack. Joining me is senior managing editor David Noyes, who oversees our faith coverage. Hi, Dave.
Hello, Peggy.
Before we start, we remind you about another way to support Mormon Land. Just go to patreon.com, where with a donation as small as $3 a month, you can access transcripts to our podcasts, our complete newsletter, and all of our exclusive religion coverage. Again, that's Patreon, patreon.com/Mormonland. Now for today's episode. Amid today's polarized political scene, many Americans throw up their hands and say, like Patrick Henry, peace, peace, but there is no peace. The war is actually begun. To some, the partisan divide seems deeper than ever, with no way to bridge it. Even religions sometimes seem to battle with other faiths, as well as those within a faith. Eboo Patel, founder and president of Interfaith America and author of We Need to Build Field Notes for Diverse Democracy, has done a lot of thinking about how to overcome divisions. He's also an impact scholar at the University of Utah and will visit the campus a few times each year during his 2-year appointment. Retired federal judge Thomas Griffith, a Latter-day Saint convert, also bemoans the toxic divides that poison public debate and rip apart the fabric of U.S. society. Recently, the American Bar Association appointed Griffith a member of a newly created Task Force for American Democracy, whose aim is to push back against authoritarian tendencies in the country. Yeah, Eboo and Tom join us today via Zoom to discuss how to bring peace to our troubled times. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Okay, let's start with Eboo. How would you describe the situation in the country today? And how do you diagnose what created this ongoing divide?
So first of all, very happy to be with you, Peggy and David, and especially happy to be with somebody I admire greatly in the world, Thomas Griffith, who is a friend and a mentor and a new member of the Interfaith America board. So thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be an impact scholar this year at the University of Utah, an appointment which will continue into next academic year. And I have to say that I'm an Ismaili Muslim with an awful lot of admiration and appreciation for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And so speaking on the Mormon Land podcast feels very comfortable to me and also an honor. So that is all by way of very true preface. So I think one of the best ways to think about the current situation in America is actually from Tony Kushner's great play, Angels in America. And in that play, at the beginning of the play, one of the characters, a gay character, meets a Mormon character, and the Mormon character, Joe, says, "I don't believe in gay people." And the gay character says, "Oh, I don't believe in Mormons." That's such a great scene, is because you can't not just believe the other person exists in America, right? So there you are in the theater watching this scene, and these two people, very live human beings facing each other, are saying, "Well, I don't believe in you." And they're being kind of friendly about it, right? And actually, diversity means there's all kinds of different people around you, and you got to find ways to relate to them. You can't just wish them away. Right? And in America, one of the great strengths of the nation is that they're not just randomly next to you in line. They're on your lacrosse team. They're part of your law firm. They're in your biology class. They are they're your dentist. And so when our nation works well, it facilitates people towards cooperation, although not on the divisive matter at hand. And that is actually a great strength. We learn how to bracket our disagreement in order to focus on our area of cooperation. I mean, if you're Jewish and your dentist is Palestinian, do you really want that person to bring up the Middle East while the drill is near your mouth? No, you want the person to fix your cavity. And that's actually the situation in America a lot. And it's a powerful thing. We need to cherish it. and we need to strengthen it.
So, Tom, what's your answer to the same question? What has created this divide, do you think?
Well, I don't know. I'm not a political scientist. I'm not a sociologist. I'm not as expert in this as Eboo is. But I can tell you from my perspective as someone who studied the Constitution most of my adult life, it's a threat to the Constitution. And it's the irony here is it's a tragic irony is it's often being carried out by people who claim the privilege of the Constitution to do so. They claim they're upholding the Constitution. I think they're missing the point. The Constitution of the United States assumes that there will be vigorous disagreement. That's good. We're all for that. But it cannot withstand a citizenry that's a contempt with one another. The Constitution is designed for disagreement, respectful disagreement, and compromise. That's perhaps the most fundamental point of the Constitution. It structures a government where compromise is necessary to accomplish things. So from my perspective, the toxic polarization we're experiencing right now is not just bad for life. It is. It's undermining the Constitution, and I think poses the most serious threat to the Constitution since the Civil War.
So, Eboo, you're on a podcast, as you stated, that focuses on religion. Do you think religion has played a role in the conflicts, and if so, how?
Well, I think the easy answer to that is yes, religion has played a role, and I think religion is a major source of civic bridge building and social cohesion and inspiring cooperation in America. So let's just begin with the symbolic. When we Americans refer to our nation in symbolic terms, what phrases do we reach for? City upon a hill, better angels of our nature, almost chosen people, cathedral of humanity, beloved community. Muslims will call this American Medina, New Jerusalem. These are all religious in nature. When we speak of ourselves as a nation, we use religious references. I think that's really powerful. I think the second thing to realize is that, I'll just use a specific example here. On the southwest side of Chicago right now, there's an organization called the Inner City Muslim Action Network. And the doctors at that organization are seeing patients right now who are mostly not Muslim. The Muslim doctors at the Inner City Muslim Action Network are seeing patients who are mostly not Muslim. The Muslim artists at the Inner City Muslim Action Network are running arts workshops for students who are mostly not Muslim. That is actually the genius of American life right there, which is that people from particular communities, principally religious communities, found institutions inspired by their specific identity, Muslim, Mormon, Jewish, Baptist, etc., that serve people of all identities, right? So the Southern Baptists train about as many disaster relief volunteers every year as the Red Cross. And whether you are an atheist or a Zoroastrian, they will show up at your house and knock on your door in an earthquake or a tornado. That's the strength of American life. That's civic cooperation, plus, as Judge Griffith referred to, the Constitution. Those two things, that's the strength of American life.
David, can I jump in?
Yeah, Tom, I was going to ask you the same question. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. From a particularly Latter-day Saint vantage point, there's something significant that's been happening in Latter-day Saint discourse recently, led largely by President Nelson, but also by President Oaks, as Latter-day Saints have been told that to be a Latter-day Saint today means that you are to be a builder of bridges of understanding, that you are to be a peacemaker. President Oaks laid down like a law that I think is just this wonderful little template when he said for a Latter-day Saint to be involved in politics and in public discourse, he said, here's the standard. Here's the standard. He said, on contested issues, we should seek to moderate and to unify. Now, I haven't heard that discourse in the past quite so much as you're hearing it now. That's different. That's asking Latter-day Saints to be different than we've been before. And I think it's asking us to take a careful look at at the way we approach political issues, the way we approach controversy. And what we're being told to do is to seek to moderate and to unify. I don't want to speak for President Oaks here, but I think that means that if my last social media post was trying to own the libs, or to cancel some conservative, if that was my last approach, that's wrong. Repent, change. We're supposed to be agents of reconciliation. Now that's a new role for us. I mean, for many years we were out in the desert. We were outside the mainstream. Well, we're now, in my view, being called to enter into the discourse, but to enter into it in a unique way, not copying what the world is doing, not copying what the Democrats are doing or what the Republicans are doing, but to create our own way. And that way is to be builders of bridges of understanding, peacemakers.
I know Latter-day Saints have been asked that in Nelson's talk that you referred to, especially from this April. Do you think that's actually happening, though?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. Give us time. Give us time. I certainly, in my world, just like talking about my ward, I hear more people talking about that. I've noticed more prayers in sacrament meeting, for example, asking us to be peacemakers, help us to be peacemakers. I don't remember hearing that before. And I think that's all. I think that's all good. And then there's this remarkable phenomenon of people like Eboo coming to see our culture and to see the potential that we have to be agents of reconciliation. And I think I talked to a number of folks like Eboo who see in us maybe things that we don't see in ourselves. And maybe it's time for us to answer President Nelson's call and to draw upon the unique experiences we have in building community to actually be peacemakers. Right? My dream is that that's actually what I will become, that what we will become, so that 10 years from now, when somebody meets a Latter-day Saint, they'll say, oh yeah, you guys, you see, you don't drink coffee, right? Yeah. And you're the builders of bridges of understanding. That would be, I think that's what President Nelson is asking us to do. I hope we're starting to move down that path.
I just want to reference what Judge Griffith said and kind of see it and maybe make it even a little bit more intense. Let me begin by this. At different times in American life, we've needed different things, right? We've needed special forces to fight some of our wars. We've needed healthcare workers during COVID. In a time of depolarization, we need bridge builders. And we need Latter-day Saints to be bridge builders. And the way that I would say it is actually, what if Latter-day Saints thought to themselves, we are going to be as good at bridge building as we are at evangelizing. We are excellent evangelists. We train for it. That is how our church has grown. We are known for it, right? You're known for it in a more serious way than you're known for not drinking coffee, right? In the way that like being a good evangelist takes skill and training and commitment and inspiration. What if you were as good at bridge building as you were good at evangelizing? And here's the thing, when you all put your mind to something, you do it. And honestly, like I am not the only person in the country who thinks to themselves right now, we need literally a cadre, a core of bridge builders. And the most likely place it is going to come from is the Latter-day Saint community.
Let me change the subject just slightly. Eboo, you wrote, I read a piece you wrote about diversity training and how that sort of has, in some ways, undermined the goal of bridge building. Can you speak a little bit more about that?
So we've moved from a melting pot model of diversity, melt your identity down so it's the same kind of bland goo as everybody else, to a battleground model of diversity, in which people they are given applause for calling other people oppressors and calling themselves the oppressed, right? It's a battle between the wicked and the wounded. And I think both of those are the wrong model of diversity. And I think the right model of diversity is what we call the Potluck Model at my organization, Interfaith America. You're proud of your identity, right? One of the reasons I dislike the current model is if you're from a minority identity like me, Muslim, brown, et cetera, you're supposed to constantly talk about how you've been put upon and wounded and hurt and oppressed. But I'm proud of my identity. My identity is a source of strength. It's a source of pride, right? And there's some bad things that have happened, but I prefer to not tell myself the bad story all the time. I prefer to tell myself about all the good things that have happened to me. That's actually part of my sacred commitment. And my identity inspires me to bring dishes to the table in the metaphor of a potluck. And part of what I want to do in a diverse democracy is I want to try other people's dishes. And I want to have conversations with those people who bring their dishes to the table. So I might bring biryani, which is a quintessential South Asian Muslim dish. I want to try your hummus. I want to try your casserole. I want to try your roast chicken. I want to try your fried rice with tofu. And I want to see how it all mixes together. And I want to have an interesting, enriching conversation with you. So the potluck metaphor is, I think, what we should be going for in diversity work. And that begins with the assumption that everybody is inspired by their identity to bring a dish to the table.
So Latterday Saints would want to know if you've had funeral potatoes.
I've heard this now a dozen times. That's casserole or whatever it is they call casserole. But casserole. And in Utah, it's funeral potatoes.
Hey, Peggy, I want to jump back to something Eboo said before your question. This is really significant. Here you have one of the most thoughtful, influential public intellectuals, thought leaders in the country today in Eboo Patel. And he's saying that Latter-day Saints have a special role to play in overcoming this toxic polarization. I have heard that from a number of people in the last year. Tim Shriver, the last year's impact scholar at the University of Utah, says the same thing. It's why he's focusing the attention of Unite on Utah. Jonathan Rauch of the Brookings Institution writes to The Atlantic. A gay, atheist, secular Jew says the same thing. He says Latter-day Saints are uniquely positioned to be leaders in this effort of overcoming toxic polarization. Noah Feldman at Harvard. You can go down a long list. I can tell you a dozen people that I've spoken to in the last year who've all saying the same thing Eboo says. And that's for Latter-day Saints who are used to thinking of ourselves as sort of like the new kids on the block or the little kids. Can we just be invited to the Thanksgiving dinner? We just want to be part of America. To hear people like that see in our culture some unique strengths that we can draw upon. I think that's terribly exciting, and I think it's consistent with what our leadership is asking us to do. It's time to step up. Time to take leadership in this.
Can I use some Muslim language around this? Because I appreciate, I totally agree with what Judge Griffith just said. So there's a term in Islam called ihsan, IHSAN, ihsan. It means excellence. And one of the things I admire about the Latter-day Saint community is you do things excellently. Like when there's an event organized by Latter-day Saints, I'm like, oh yeah, I know this is going to be tight. Right? and I'm not just blowing smoke, right? Like you have 400 institutes at college campuses across the country in which young people are devoted to their faith. They build community, they learn skills, they go out in the world. What if one of the skills they learned was to be bridge builders? What if a college dean of students, when that campus is being torn apart by, say, the conflict in the Middle East, could count on the LDS Institute to have trained 12 students who can facilitate dialogues, who have the skill set and the knowledge base and the orientation to facilitate dialogue between the contentious parties? You guys could do that. If you chose to, you could do that.
So, Tom, going back to the core of the divisions, Latter-day Saint scholars Patrick Mason and David Pulsifer write in their book, Proclaim Peace, that, quote, conflict is necessary. So how does this healthy, maybe necessary conflict sometimes become damaging, even dangerous division?
Yeah. So
where's the line?
Yeah. So first of all, I agree. As I said, The Constitution requires disagreement. I don't trust any decision from any source that isn't the product of disagreement, whether that's the White House, Capitol Hill, or 47 East South Temple. I want to know that there's been disagreement. That's not the issue. The issue isn't that we want to get everyone to agree on everything. It's the nature of the disagreement. And when the disagreement involves contempt, when the idea isn't that I just disagree with you, but I hate you. The social scientists have a phrase for it. This is called affective polarization. The idea that my hatred for the other side is greater than my allegiance to my own. That is not disagreement. That's contempt. And that's what needs to be taken out of the system. The house is on fire with this contemptuous disagreement. We need to find ways to put out the contempt so we can go back to the old-fashioned way of just good old-fashioned arguments with winners and losers and compromise. But what's new right now is the level of contempt that's in it. So that's the issue.
Eboo, what about you? How does one does this disagreement go from being a good thing to a bad thing?
Yeah. So I mean, your Governor Cox, is national political leader in this, literally the current national political leader of this in launching the Disagree Better campaign, right? So he's not saying don't disagree. He's saying bring different ideas to the table, engage with them in positive, proactive, and constructive ways, and come out with the best idea, which is how any good company, any good organization, any good athletic team runs. And as Tom just said, the problem right now is our disagreements are characterized by contempt. And as my friend Amanda Ripley, who literally wrote the book on this, High Conflict, I just did a podcast with her, which just dropped today. She said, here's the thing about high conflict. You always destroy what's most precious to you. Who gets damaged the most in a high conflict divorce? The kids, right? And so that's a great sadness, right? You hate the enemy so much you're willing to destroy yourself. I mean, the Buddhists have a great image for this, which is you drink poison hoping that your enemy will get hurt. Right? We've all done this, right? So it's an enormously human thing to do, but human beings, being the rational animal, when we are in that situation, we need to recognize what is happening and be able to walk ourselves out of it.
So President Oaks has told us to be hopeful here. And so I'm going to try and be hopeful here. Here's the good news here. The good news is over 90% of Americans are sick and tired of the toxic polarization. They don't know how to get out of it, though. Now, I think people like Eboo, who are experts in this area, others like Braver Angels and the group that Governor Cox is pulling together, they tell some pretty good stories here about how to get out of it. And I'm going to summarize what I've learned from it. There's probably a whole lot more, but there are two things that I've learned from listening to Eboo and being with Governor Cox on this. The first thing is, and this is a pretty simple one, get away, stop cable, just stop it. Cable is not good. If you're getting your news primarily from cable, the talk radio, and social media, you're being played, right? You're being played. Arthur Brooks calls it the outrage industrial complex. And they feed upon this sense of contempt and outrage. So that's the first, a very practical thing. Just stop cable. Just don't stop talk radios. Start getting your news from social media. Okay, that's the easy thing to do. Here's the harder thing to do, but perhaps even more important. You need to get people in your life who disagree with you. And you need to have some discussions with them about these things. And when done properly, what people find out is that they will still disagree with the other person, but they won't hate them anymore. They'll come to realize, oh, we just see things differently. I think your ideas are crazy, but you know what? I kind of like you. And to me, that's the goal, not to get rid of the disagreement, but to get rid of that element of contempt and of hate. And I think we learned that the best way to do that is to get in close quarters with people who are different than you. And that there's no group in America who does that better than Interfaith America.
So yesterday I read this quote, peacemaking is not passive. It is the act of finding a third way that is neither fight nor flight, but the careful, arduous pursuit of reconciliation and justice. Based on it went on to say more about love as being a part of it. Eboo, what do you think about that? Do you agree with it? I mean, do you think of peacemaking as is not passive?
Well, I agree with the first half of it, and I actually disagree with the second half. The just. But I'm gonna get deep for a second here. So okay. One of my favorite lines, I said this when I was at the University of Utah several times: bridges don't fall from the sky or rise from the ground. People build them, right? It is a coach and team leaders who take a diverse, contentious athletic team and get them to work all together, right? I think one of the things we have to realize in diversity work is that people have different definitions of justice. The people who are pro-choice believe that they are on the side of justice. And the people who are pro-life believe that they are on the side of justice. So getting them to agree on the same definition of justice is virtually impossible. A handful of people might switch sides, but people have spent their entire careers evangelizing for one or the other cause. So what's the goal? The goal is civic cooperation. The goal is to make sure that pro-life person and a pro-choice person on a PTA, their disagreement doesn't destroy the PTA, doesn't end the athletics program at the high school, doesn't kill the theater program, right? The goal in a diverse democracy where people have different definitions of ultimate concerns of justice is civic cooperation. And that is actually a really good thing. And I'll tell you, one of the places that recognizes that is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, right? So as good as you Mormons are at evangelizing, 95% of my conversations with Mormons, and I have a lot, is about cooperating and not evangelizing. I imagine you think that I don't have the fullness of the banquet as a Muslim, right? The way that LDS folks think about this is I have something of the banquet. We have reverence for each other's traditions. But what we are really looking to do is to cooperate. I think that is a sacred matter. And as Judge Griffith keeps on saying, President Nelson and President Oaks is saying, yes, we're going to seek to convert other people. That is a sacred trust. And also cooperation is a sacred trust. I think to myself, in Christian language, which of course members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints are effectively a denomination of Christianity in kind of Christian language that's shared across the tradition. There is the Great Commission and there's the Great Cooperation. Seek to convert others. That's the Great Commission. Seek to cooperate with others. That's the Good Samaritan story, right? It is like a central story in Christianity. Help people who are different from you.
I'm going to push you a little bit more on that, though. I mean, honestly, there are some issues where let's just go to a kind of easy one. The whole Civil War was fought over slavery. Can you just cooperate with on really? I mean, obviously, the case of pro-life, pro-choice is also very difficult. How do you get to get rid of something as terrible as slavery if one side isn't a little more passionate and a little more right?
I think that there are a handful of issues on the planet that are evil. I think slavery counts as one of those, right? I absolutely think that's the case. Okay. And when you look out your window, I suggest you don't see 100 hills that you're going to die on, right? Maybe there's one hill that you're going to die on, but you probably don't see it, right? And so I am not looking for reasons to not engage with people. Right? Like I'm not buying a brownie from the KKK bake sale, but I'm talking to everybody else. I'm looking for reasons to be in constructive engagement with folks. If I think you're a Nazi, I am not going to talk to you, but I'm not going to assume you're a Nazi.
That's a good point. Tom, do you have something to say about that? About the action?
Yeah. So from a constitutional angle, it's been often noted that what's unique about the United States of America is that we're joined together by ideas. It's not blood and soil. And the ideas that join us together are simply stated. They're in the Declaration of Independence and the Gettysburg Address, right? We believe in liberty and equality for all. And my view is, as long as you're committed to liberty and equality, come on in and let's have an argument about how we do that. You may think there's more government involvement. I may think there'd be less government involvement, but we're both committed to the idea of liberty and equality. Now, if you're not committed to that, sorry, there are other places in the world you can go to that. But if you're not committed to liberty and equality, we're not going to be able to have a fruitful dialogue and discussion. So I do think there are limits. I do think there are limits. So and those are the ones that I would define as a constitutional matter. Got to be committed to the Constitution. If you're here to undermine the Constitution, overthrow it, sorry. But if you're here committed to liberty and equality in the Constitution, boy, let's have plenty of discussions about what that means.
Eboo, you've given a few examples, and we've talked about a few, but where some concrete examples where peacemaking or peace building efforts have paid off?
So I think that the most important peacemaking and peace building we do here. So first of all, let me just say, at Interfaith America, we keep our discourse largely to the things that happen within the borders of this country. Okay, so I'm not going to talk about contemporary conflicts abroad right now. I talk about historic things, right? But I'll give you one of my favorite examples, which is Mandela in South Africa. And so you have the African National Congress, which is largely a nonviolent movement. Yes, it has a small armed wing, but it's largely a nonviolent movement led by Nelson Mandela, who, when he is at Robben Island, learns the language of his jailers, learns their kids' names, and says to them, "You have my body, but you will not take my mind or my soul. You will not direct how I treat you. I am going to treat you with human dignity. And in treating you, my jailers, with human dignity, I am going to elevate your own human dignity and help you treat other people with human dignity." So at his inauguration in the early 1990s, one of his jailers is at his side, right? And that's a peacemaking that recognizes the people you are seeking, the people you oppose and are trying to overthrow. In most cases, you're going to have to live with them afterwards. So the manner in which you oppose them and seek to defeat them really matters. If you humiliate them, expect them to be an enemy for a long time. If you simply say there is a better way in which all of us can thrive, expect to be able to build a positive society together. And Mandela says there's nothing more dangerous than a humiliated person, even if that person is humiliated rightly. So I think that the way Mandela leads the South African liberation movement, such that the 1990s in South Africa, when he becomes the president, is not a bloodbath, and rather is Black and white and Indian and Malay working together, I think that's a pretty good reference point for how we ought to be together. I mean, it's beautifully depicted in the movie Invictus, where Mandela dons the jersey of the rugby team, the Springboks, which is a white symbol. And in donning the jersey, he changes the meaning of the symbol. He says, this is for everybody. This is a multicultural nation embracing its championship rugby team.
And if I can add a footnote to that. So I served my mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in South Africa from 1973 to 1975. Mandela was on Robben Island. It was the nadir of apartheid. And yet, almost 20 years later, I attend a meeting in the rotunda of the Capitol of the United States, at which Mandela is given a congressional medal. And I sit behind two South African generals in their full uniform. One was white, the other was Black, and they embraced one another. They were proud of that moment that their country and their leader were being recognized by the United States for its achievements. So it's real. It can happen, but it is hard work. It's hard work, but as Susan Tanner used to teach us when she was the president of the Young Women's Organization of the church. We can do hard things.
I mean, you built a religious community in the last 200 years. That's pretty darn good. Less than 200 years, right?
In a desert of all places, right? Yeah.
So, Eboo, I was intrigued by what you said about on the college campus, get 12 Latter-day Saints to be facilitators. How do you teach those skills? How are young people supposed to know how to do that?
We literally do this for a living at Interfaith America. We have the largest annual convening of students and staff and faculty learning how to be interfaith leaders. We have a network of nearly 1,000 campuses that we work with. My work at the University of Utah is a part of that. There's significant interest by Elder Gilbert and others who are part of the church leadership in spreading that to Latter-day Saint colleges and universities and to institutes. So learning how to bring people from different religious identities together to do service projects is a skill. Learning how to facilitate a conversation between people of different faiths and backgrounds and identities is a skill. I mean, I write about this in my book, Interfaith Leadership. It's a book specifically about the vision, knowledge base, and skill set of bringing people who orient around religion differently together to cooperate.
Seems like everyone should learn that skill, right?
I think you all should lead the pack, but yes, I mean, I'd love to have a nation of interfaith leaders.
I think Eboo has just set out a new curriculum for primary, young men, young women, Sunday school, elders quorum, and relief society. That'd be great. Great use of our time there.
An enrichment text.
Okay, maybe last question. Are you both hopeful that these skills can and will be implemented, or are we going to have to go down the darkness a lot longer before we get there?
I'm hopeful. At times, I'm not very optimistic, but I don't know what else we can do but try this. And I have faith. I believe in God. I believe that Christ is active in the affairs of the world. I can't think of anything in the world today that he'd be more urgently interested in than us helping him to do this. But it's a heavy load, and so that's why I say I'm hopeful. At times, my optimism flags, but I'm hopeful.
And Eboo, what about you? Hopeful?
I'm hopeful too, and I'll speak of Deen and Dunya here. That's a Muslim phrase for faith and world. So when it comes to faith, we Muslims believe God gave us His breath, and He endowed us with the ability to flow with diversity, and He vouched for our goodness when the angels denied it. Right? That's a lot there. So we kind of carry. We're meant to be God's Abd and Khalifa, His servant and representative on the planet. Right? And I know that folks in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints believe in some kind of version of that. I think that's what Tom means when he says we have to help Jesus in this, right? And then the dunya, right? So I come back to Chicago from graduate school at Oxford in the early 2000s, and I hear about this guy, kind of a charismatic state senator guy named Barack Obama. It doesn't seem to be able to reach office much higher than state senate, but he's an interesting person. I'm like, yeah, put him in the back of my mind, I'll pay attention to that name. And I'm trying to build my organization at the time. And I'm going to see the mayor and I'm going to see the CEO of Exelon. And all the time, this guy, Barack Obama's name is playing in the back of my head. And I go to an event for him as he's running third for the Democratic nomination for the Senate race. And nobody's giving him a chance at all. Right. And there's 25 people there. And he talks to my wife for 10 minutes. My wife's a civil rights attorney, like Obama was trained as. And I'm like, interesting guy, kind of a compelling character, right? And then all of a sudden, like literally right in front of my eyes, this guy goes from like a local neighborhood guy who you'd see at the Medici in Hyde Park with his daughters to the presidency, like right in front of my eyes. I think that's part of what Tom means when you have to be hopeful, but not optimistic in the sense of sometimes you do your work and the moment is right and the stars align. And as Seamus Haney says, hope and history rhyme, right? You come up to bat and you swing, and every once in a while you just connect in the right way at the right time. And maybe this is our moment. Maybe this is the moment for bridge builders to do their work. And I really do think the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has a special vanguard role to play.
Eboo Patel, Tom Griffith, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
And thanks to Dave Noyce.
Always a pleasure.
And to our producer, Chris Samuels. We remind our listeners they can keep up on all the happenings in and about the church by subscribing to the Salt Lake Tribune's free Mormon Land newsletter. Just go to sltrib.com to sign up. And we'll talk again next time on Mormon Land.